Today we're going to talk about render props. And render props were like a really hot pattern to use probably for the past couple of years. I think these have fallen out of favor now that hooks are around. Hooks are a little bit more of a straightforward way to pass data around or access data or whatever. But this is something you're definitely going to run into if you're using somebody else's component library and maybe they haven't updated it for hooks. This is something that's used in Gatsby quite frequently with their component for static query. So if you use that component instead of their use static query hook, you will run into that. I would prefer, if you're working in Tag v5, that you use the hook. It's much cleaner. We're only using the hook currently, but this is something you should be aware of and know about. It also gives you a little bit of a hint into how React works. So right here, what we're looking at is a component that has a render prop. And so it's quite literally a prop that is render. If that isn't straightforward, I don't know what is. But essentially, what width, God, I could have named that probably a little bit better. Width returns the width of the page. And so I'll show you what it's doing in just a minute, but what we can do with that is in render here, we get whatever the render prop is. So we get a piece of data or pieces of data that we can use to render out more of our page, whatever that is. And so in this case, we're saying if the width is greater than 900, we can go ahead and render out our to-do list. But if it's not, we have to do this like really horrible thing and lock users out because I don't want someone to be able to use this on a phone. This is a desktop only to-do app for good reason. You need a keyboard if you're going to be writing things. Don't thumb this around here. So now that we can see how amazingly functional this is, use your imagination to figure out some other ways to use that. But this is essentially a component that uses a render prop. So what we have here is just a function, and we pick render off. So this is destructured props. So this is essentially the same thing as if I did this and then so props.render. So these are functionally equivalent, but I prefer and our standards enforce destructuring of props in components and functional components. So you're going to run into this. So we're just pulling render out of there. And we're just doing some, we'll call it data fetching here, right? It doesn't matter if we're using a hook, which in this case we are. It doesn't matter if we're, making an API call or, doing any number of things. We're getting some sort of data ready to pass to whatever is going to be rendered. And so when that appears here, this is what's rendered out and we have access to the data. So that's how that render props pattern works.